Now I would like to invite my dear colleague, Dr. Markus Krah, the director of the LBI in New York since October 22. He got his PhD at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York and taught Jewish religious and intellectual history at the University of Potsdam before joining the LBI. Both his first book and his current research deal with the European Jewish legacy in American Jewish cultural and identity. And I value very much that Markus is here. He only came for one night in Israel to be with us here tonight and tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Irene, and thank you much for inviting me to this conference. Home is a great topic, and being at home is being in the company of like-minded people and friends like tonight. I already feel very much at home. And I think this may be a good moment to say thank you to you, Irene, not just for organizing this wonderful conference, but also for making the LBI in Jerusalem a home. For research, for conversations, for building bridges, a safe space in difficult times, and a warm place to be. I don't officially represent the international LBI community here, but I think I can speak for all of us, saying that as you move to the next step in your career, we will miss you a lot. You have shown the meaning and importance of LBI today here from Jerusalem, and this is the segue to the topic of the conference and of the panel tonight, about the meaning of German Jewish history and the LBI in the American context, in my case. So what role does LBI play in America? What role should it play? How do we preserve and promote the history of German-speaking Jews in this context? And what does that have to do with the idea of a home in the present and in the past, and hopefully in the future? And the following is not meant as a complaint or as a Jeremiah about how difficult this job is, but in the largest diaspora community, or the second largest community outside the state of Israel, this context matters, I think. So here are a few factors that make our mission in the US an uphill struggle. And this is not just about the fact that to put up an event, a conference in New York, will always compete with 20 Broadway musicals and 15 other book launches and 10 other cultural projects just within Manhattan. There are many other factors that make it difficult to engage even an educated Jewish audience which is interested in history in the work the Baeck Institute does in New York. And one is the very friendly but still fierce sibling rivalry with our East European Jewish brethren. The LBI New York shares a building with the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research, which does East European Jewish history, and they have an unfair historical advantage, I have to say. So one is in terms of numbers. About 80% of currently living American Jews have East European roots, and the remaining 20% are not all of German Jewish origin. The East European immigrants came more recently to the US until about 100 years ago. The German immigrants of the 1930s and 40s matter a great deal culturally and intellectually, but not so much numerically. For various reasons, the East European immigrants had retained a greater sense of Jewish distinctiveness, mostly expressed in the importance of the Yiddish language, which they also kept in the US. I cannot tell you how much I envy my YIVO colleagues for the impact Fiddler on the Roof has had for the past 60 years. I wish there was a musical like Fiddler on the Roof about Hannah Arendt, Rachel Varnhagen, Martin Buber. If anybody feels like writing a libretto and setting this to music, please talk to me, and we will make a huge splash for the 75th anniversary of LBI in Jerusalem, New York, and London. And then more seriously, as you all know, German-speaking Jews, particularly Jews from the German lands, have always been under the suspicion of blindly assimilating to German non-Jewish expectations, and that they have been proven tragically wrong by the Shoah. If you add to this German Jews, shall we say, very limited support for Zionism, at least in the beginning, you can imagine that there is yet another obstacle to appreciating German Jewish culture on its own terms. The last point of this is related to the by now in the academic field well-established observation that the Jewish identification of American Jews rests on two pillars, or maybe three, or maybe four. Two important ones are the Holocaust, remembrance of the Holocaust. Number two, supporting the State of Israel. For some, it's also religion, and for almost everyone, most recently, it is anti-Semitism. And you will not be surprised that it is much easier to program and fundraise for projects dealing with anti-Semitism than with Moses Mendelssohn or 19th century immigration from Germany to the US. And we may wonder for a moment, is this really such a terrible thing that German Jewish history seems to lose ground in the larger context of Jewish studies or Jewish history? For some people who are dealing with other fields of Jewish history, this may be an overdue correction to an earlier disproportionate role German Jewish history played in the field as part of an elite-focused historiography, Leidens- und Gelehrtengeschichte. Or, from an ideological perspective, if there is still such a thing as a Jerusalem school of Jewish historiography, all these developments may be welcome proof of the conviction about the centrality of peoplehood and Eretz Israel, downplaying the importance of diaspora and focusing less on how the context, German context, American context, affects our understanding of German Jewish history. So if you approach the problem from this perspective, then LBI New York works in a double diaspora context. We're doing German Jewish history for and about people outside of Germany, and we're doing it in the diaspora vis-à-vis the State of Israel. Has any of this changed since October 7th or lehavdil, since January 2025 with the beginning of a new American administration? And if so, how do we, LBI New York, deal with these factors, the broader context and the situation after October 7th? So, circling back one more time to the topic of the conference, the home, there is a long-standing discussion as to whether American Jews feel at home in America. And this is not specific to Jews of German background. Until recently, there was a growing consensus that this was indeed the case. Home, America is home for the Jewish people. More recently, there are more question marks condensed in an article by writer Franklin Foer in The Atlantic, which some of you may have seen under the title, "The Golden Age of American Jews is Ending," or in Yiddish, "Oi, was ist geworden von dem goldenen Land?" It was mostly based on the rise of anti-Semitism on the right and left, as exemplified in the 2018 shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh and everything that followed afterwards. What we see as a response to this in our work is a movement in two opposite directions. Some people, understandably, redirect their attention and their funding to other issues than German Jewish history, Israel-related, immigration-related, defending democracy in America. Others become more interested in Jewish topics and Jewish community, including Jewish history, as it relates to the present questions. So what we try to do, and I'm sure that many of you do the same in your respective institutions, is to find the right balance between doing history and engaging current questions. And you can imagine that the polarization which I think all the societies in which we operate are going through doesn't make this in any way easier. But nevertheless, I believe that the LBI in New York, and I assume that the same is the case for Jerusalem and for London, I believe that the LBI should also have a voice in the present discourse, however difficult this is. And the question, what can we learn from German Jewish history, may make some academic historians cringe, but I think it reflects a need on the part of our audience. So we try to answer this question in various ways. I just want to mention two or three before I conclude. We find a growing and ever-growing interest in family history and genealogy, which I believe is one of the key ways in which we can engage people dealing with German Jewish history. There is, and this also makes a few academic historians cringe, a growing interest in Jewish contributions, a little bit like 30 years ago, counting the Jewish Nobel Prize winners. But we recently had a series of events on psychoanalysis and the German Jewish contribution to psychoanalysis, and people came to an extent that we had not expected. And I believe, and I think this is probably more the case even for Jerusalem than for us, that LBI has an important social role to play in organizing communities, providing space and a forum for people who come together around a topic. In our case, we had events around Kindertransporte or the Kitchener camp, or other events which brought together descendants who came clearly looking for community as a way to identify Jewishly and identify with their German Jewish heritage. Calling this a home is overstating a little bit, but there is an element of that. So is that what our founders had in mind in 1955, and is this a model that we can sustain in the future? This day and age, I just don't know. But I'm glad that there are quite a lot of people here who also believe that there should be a future in this model. And here we are together, 70 years later, still searching and redefining the home LBI should be for the German Jewish past and for the present and for the future. Thank you all for being part of this.